Hi, it's Carl, and today I'll be sharing lots of hints and tips on how you can make sure your maples are absolutely fine in full sun. Hi there maple fans, and in this series of videos I'll be sharing what I do throughout an entire year on a monthly basis. Please note that these months are based on UK timings, but of course can easily be adapted to anywhere else in the world. So the first tip for you is to be really careful with your new trees. I bought this myself from a polytunnel, and it's been bought in. It's spent all its life in a polytunnel. It was also been drip fed as well, and that's just not really going to promote a healthy root system. I'll cover more about that later on. But also, as you can see, because it's had a very nice life, it hasn't been exposed to full sun, it's suffering somewhat. So I'll come back to acclimatization of your Japanese maples later. But just moving on to a subject of all the other maples in this video are all sun tolerant or heat tolerant. So picking the right cultivar is absolutely key. And if you look at this Shishigashira, it's got a lot going for it. Firstly, the leaves are kind of curled over. This little adaptation means it doesn't lose water very much from wind. So that makes it a really, really good tree for sort of heat tolerance and suffering direct sunlight. It's also quite a stocky little fellow. And if you move the branches, they don't wave around at all, really. It's sort of really stiff. And what that means is when the wind blows, it's not going to blow it all over the place. And that's just going to help reduce evaporation, basically. Worth just mentioning that when you've got small trees, very small trees, be careful with them. I wouldn't put 1 litre trees into full sun. This one's been around. I've had this it's in its 3rd year now. It's growing into a decent sized tree. It's more established. It is more acclimatized. And also because there's a number of leaves here, as you can see, it's doing really well. That if it loses 1 or 2 because there's a bit of sun scorch, it's got plenty to fall back on. Where these quite sparsely leaved plants can be a real problem. Also, the adaptation on this particular tree, Shinda Shoujo, is brilliant because the leaves are very waxy, so they offer a lot of moisture retention. So here we've just got a little fella here, Rhode Island Red. Some of these maples can be a bit hard to find. They're not in all the big nurseries. But if you keep a list of them and shop around and look online, they can be sourced. Lovely little fellow, and just really heat resistant, like its big brother Bloodgood, really. But I also find in general these small sort of stocky little trees just do really well. There's a lot of foliage there. Once again, at the end of summer, if there's a bit of sunburn on the top, there's loads of leaves below to fall back on. And that's been out in full sun from the beginning of the season and has done really, really well. So every tree is labelled for you in this video, so I hope you use it as a bit of a database, a bit of a shopping list maybe to get some sun-tolerant trees. I'll come to this later, but some trees will never become completely sun-tolerant. Some are very sun-tolerant. There's kind of everything in between, really. This one's done a mad growth spurt at the end of last year and into this year. But again, it's perfectly happy where it is. It's good to expect these trees actually on a regular basis when they're first in full sun, though, just to keep an eye on them. And if things start to go awry, then we can take swift action, to be honest with you. So sometimes it's hard to say why one tree is better than another, but I do find these linear lilobum trees, the sort of long strap leaf trees, are generally much better. Why? Because those little leaves don't lose much moisture. So what this is all about really is moisture retention. Direct sunlight on those isn't going to have a massive effect, but also wind is going to sort of pass through and over them and again have a little effect on reducing the moisture levels in the tree, to be honest. So worth noting as we come on to another brilliant little tree that the labels on that you buy in supermarkets, in garden centres, will all say have morning sun and afternoon shade. You could do that. It's fine. You could give these shade all day if you wanted to. But I have a south-facing garden, as many people do. And why not enjoy them in full sunlight? Because they look beautiful. Do note that I'm in a zone 8B. And if you're in zone 9, yes, you'd have to pare this down a bit. You'd have to give them sunshade. But on the other hand, if you live in a part of the world with less sun, then you could be more aggressive and try it with more cultivars. So what I really like to stress is that even though all of these cultivars are sun tolerant, they would have difficulty in coping with direct sunlight and a load of drying wind at the same time and a load of heat at the same time. So pure heat on their own, I've seen polytunnels at 50 degrees. These trees can actually do quite well. but there's no wind in that environment, there's no direct sun in that environment. So managing the wind, which is something we can do with neighbouring trees, conifers, fences, all sorts of things, I've done videos on it, that's what's absolutely critical too. And just to say, if you'd like to come with me on my Acer journey, please do like and subscribe to my little channel, it really helps. I've also recently set up a Patreon site, so that's a great way of supporting me too, and help out with some of the costs of my excursions really. There's also the offer of some personal help, if you'd like it, either in a group format or at a one-to-one basis. So I think there's a danger in generalisation with Japanese maples, but the smaller varieties do seem to do quite well. Again, they're a bit lower, they're a bit in more shelter from the wind, and that all helps protect them, I suppose. So a lovely little fella here that only grows to about 1 metre by 1 metre over many years. A lovely little compact tree that again is doing absolutely fine in full sun, to be honest. As you can see, there's some nice red new growth on it. So this is my copy of Shana. Some nurseries I know won't even stock this tree actually, because it can cause problems, and I think if you put it in the ground, bizarrely, it's most unusual that it does rather badly, but this is doing okay. Now, it has had a little bit of dieback over the winter. This is quite usual for this tree, but it's basically really healthy. So I'm just making the point, if you're going to put your maples in full sun, they need to have a healthy root system, absolutely vital, and just be healthy generally. And the first thing you would do if you've got a problem tree is take it out of full sun and get it in partial shade straight away. So yeah, just mentioned it again there, roots absolutely critical. You've got to have a good root system on your tree to get the water from the compost up to the leaves. It's just that simple really. Unfortunately, therefore, overpotting your tree isn't going to work, by which I mean putting them in a great big pot because that's going to hold more moisture. Yeah, it might work over the summer, but in the winter it's just going to promote the roots rotting and create you enormous problems the following year. So many trees will leaf out fine in the spring. They look really good, really healthy. But as soon as they're sort of stressed by a bit of sun, the root system's just not there to provide the moisture, and then we sort of run into terrible problems. So I've mentioned this in several comments on Facebook and social media generally. And by all means leave comments on my videos. I'm more than happy to respond to them. But this is such a great tree because in the ground especially, it grows really fast. So if you've got the land or you've got a growing pot, by all means. But that might provide great shade for other trees later on, and it just thrives in full sun. As you can see there, it will just slightly change the leaves a little bit. But as we'll come back to in a second, that's a really important thing to note because it's quite adaptable. So often as well, these weeping varieties do well. Hard to know why to some degree, and that's not done quite as well this year as its sort of friend and cousin that we'll see in a minute. There's a little bit of dieback going on, but that's something to do with the winter and the spring, I guess. But very happy tree throughout the summer months really, and any kind of like weeping maple is a really nice addition to any garden, to be honest with you. It's something that's quite interesting. And that just brings us on to the subject of watering, which is interesting because it's only one of a number of steps, but it's obviously really important. As I put there, drench your maples. I flood them to the top at least once if there's bubbles bubbling up. I've done videos on this. Maybe twice if that doesn't happen, so they get a really good soaking. But most importantly, I then leave them until they're slightly dry. This feels a bit counterintuitive, but like the drip-fed tree that I showed you originally, the root system on that tree is not as good as these, because when they get slightly dry, they will send out roots to find more water. It's kind of that simple really, but that's going to really help in the summer months and also through the winter. So this is Cascade Ruby, and a great example of adaptation and acclimatization. So therefore, you can see that when it gets more and more sun, the leaves change colour. It's kind of photosensitive, it can react to that. And I'm glad if you've made it this far through the video, because my absolutely top tip for today is don't expect to put your maples that you've just bought and just suddenly put them in full sun. If you've got a maple that you bought this year, even though it might be a very tolerant cultivar, I would wait till next spring now before you put it in full sun and let it experience that the spring sunshine's not so harsh, and it gives the tree a time to react, to adapt, to change colour a little bit as that season progresses, as they are now. It isn't even summer yet in the UK. It's still the end of May. So summer's almost upon us, but already the trees have had, a couple of months to really sort of acclimatise and adapt, which is really, really valuable to them. So dissectum filigree there, absolutely lovely, and a brilliant example of a tree that you can basically put anywhere because it will adapt and cope with it if you give it time. So what about some others? Cotonuito, you can put in full sun actually. I've just chosen not to. So sometimes trees will tolerate the sun and that's fine, and it will go a sort of red colour like that. To be honest with you, if I've got space, I'll probably get even more shade because I rather prefer the lush green look. On the other hand, you've got things like Orange Dream or derivatives of Orange Dream that just hate direct sun. They really, really do. And I spoke to people in nurseries about this. They never ever really get fully adapted. It's just genetics. It's the way they work. As you can see, this gets a bit more sun, starting to colour up just a little bit, which is fine, but too much can cause problems. And this Dragon Master is a derivative. It's a sort of weeping version. So that's going to be exactly the same. He's better where it is under shelter there. And the brilliant tree that is Jordan, lovely lush colours in the shade and much better off for it.